Good morning, Cedars Church family, coming to you again with another word of encouragement to start your day. In the publishing world, I have done various writers' workshops, and I've counseled with people who they come to me as writers and they're looking to get their works published. And one question that I'll often ask is, "What are you writing now?" And a lot of times I am met with a blank stare. They're not writing anything right now. They're not working on anything new. They're not consistently writing. But something that we often say in the publishing world is that writers write. If you are a writer, then you should be writing. You should be constantly writing various types of things, be working on articles and blogs and whatever else that you can do to exercise that gift. Well, James kind of picks up the same idea in James chapter 1, starting in verse 26. And he says, "Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves." Now, to break this down real quick, if you consider yourself religious, that doesn't mean you go to church and you lift your hands at a certain time or you kneel down at a certain time and you always take communion and you do these things like ritual. It's not talking about being a ritualistic person. He's talking about being devout. If you consider yourself truly, deeply devout, a worshiper of God, if you consider yourself a worshiper of God and yet you don't keep a tight rein on your tongue, then you deceive yourself. Now, why such importance on the tongue? Well, I can think of twice in my life that I ended up in a fight. And both times I got myself sucker punched and I ended up with a black eye. I don't remember how bad it hurt. I don't really have any scars from it. And there's no lasting damage, and all is forgiven. But I can tell you time and time again the words that people have used that have really cut to my heart, that the most damaging things that were ever done to me were done by people speaking things because they didn't control what was coming out of their mouths. James talks elsewhere in his book about how look at how such a large ship is moved by such a small rudder, or how such a large fire is started by such a small spark. The tongue, the things that we say, and by translation, they weren't Facebooking, blogging, and commenting the way that we do today. That wasn't their method of communication, emails and such. By translation, then we would also have to say the things that we write, the ways that we express ourselves verbally or in the written word. When we don't put a bridle on that, when we don't rein it in, when we don't keep it under control, like we bridle a horse to keep it under control, we decide how that horse is going to turn right or left. If you don't rein in your tongue, then you deceive yourself thinking that you are a devout believer. Well, I just can't help myself. I can't control it. It just comes out. And James would say that being able to control that is part of, it is defined in your being a worshipful, God loving person. He says, in fact, your devoutness is worthless if you can't stop the damage that comes out of your mouth in your speech. He says, religion or devoutness, true belief that God accepts, that God our Father accepts, that He, in His judgment, decides is good, is pure and faultless, is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress. And I would say by default that would also include anyone who cannot defend themselves, anyone who is struggling, anyone who is helpless, and also to keep yourself from being polluted by the world, or to be able to remain unstained by the world. It often seems that it's the world that really ticks us off, that it's the mindsets in this world that really wants to set off our tongues. So I would encourage you today to consider how good of a handle you have on the things that you say, because uh, the words that we use, the things that we say, can cause the most damage. And most importantly, why is all that tied into our faith and our devoutness? Because the words that we express and the actions that we present to others, that's how people see God. That's going to be how they're going to determine who God is and what his character must be. How are you representing God? If you really love him, if you truly, deeply love him, then wouldn't you want to present him as purely and as true as possible? That's my goal. I hope it's yours today too. God bless you. Have yourselves a great day. And remember, you are loved.